Alright, hello and welcome to the Buffy Commentary Project. This is Season 1, Episode 2, The Harvest. Let's get right into it.
In every generation, there is a chosen one. She alone will stand against the vampires, the demons, and the forces of darkness. She is the Slayer.
I let that intro play because we skipped over it in the last episode, but also because it's relevant to what I want to talk about in this one, namely mythology and the show's relationship to it. This bit where Buffy accidentally repels Luke with her cross is relevant too, so put a pin on that. But in the case of the intro, what I want to highlight is the way the narration frames each episode with legend. It tells us the myth of Buffy in a booming movie trailer voice, accompanied by the ominously mythological images from Buffy's dream in the first episode. She is the chosen one, the intro tells us, and this is the story you should know her by. On the one hand, this introduction acts as just that, an introduction. It gives a new viewer a bit of information to understand the show they're about to watch. But on the other hand, a frame constrains as much as it illuminates. It traps you into a perspective. It tells you how to see things. And given that the show eventually abandons this frame, and that frame is so heavily mythological, I think we should be viewing it critically. I think we should be viewing this legend not just as information, but also as something that traps Buffy, something she needs to eventually unshackle herself from. Speaking of mythology as a trap, I talked about Young and the Shadow in the last episode, but while the credits play, I now want to expand on that and talk about the more general concept of Jungian individuation. As ever, I bring up Young not to be obscure, but because the model of individuation arguably lies at the heart of much of this show. By explaining it now, more things will make sense as we go forward. So in the Jungian view, individuation is the process by which a person becomes their truest and most entire self, which understandably is why it might end up as a philosophical basis for a show about growing up. Put very simplistically, Jungian individuation has four main components. First, it involves letting go of the persona, which is the part of a person that is a performance for the world around them. It is the mask a person wears in order to interact with society.
Life's a show, and we all play our parts.
Second, individuation involves confronting and ultimately reconciling with the suppressed and unconscious parts of oneself, also known as the shadow. Third, it involves integrating the masculine and feminine parts of oneself, also known as the animus and anima. Finally, and most importantly for what I want to talk about right now, it involves achieving independence from the myths and symbols that make up a person's underlying understanding of the world, also known as the collective unconscious. The Jungian view is not that any of these things should be entirely rejected, but rather that a fully individuated person will be able to integrate them into their sense of self, and to navigate between them at will. Individuation represents a kind of psychological independence or self-ownership, but not isolation or repression. So right now, because Buffy is at the beginning of her journey, she does not have independence from mythology.
This world is older than any of you know. Contrary to popular mythology, it did not begin as a paradise.
As we saw in the first episode, mythology is something associated with Giles or the Master, older male figures of authority. And as we see in the opening narration, it's something that even constrains the perspective of the show. And even though Buffy's cross does save her from being bitten, it's not something she wields intentionally. She passively received it from Angel, whose identity and intentions were ambiguous. In other words, in total, the episode starts by showing that Buffy is not conscious or in control of her story. Whether myth attacks her or saves her is not something she chose. Contrast with Prophecy Girl, when Buffy will at first deliberately reject that same cross and then deliberately put it back on. And how Buffy gets to that place of agency is the story of the season.
No, those weren't vampires. Those were just guys in thunder need of a facial. Or maybe they had rabies. It could have been rabies. And that guy turning to dust, just a trick of light. That's exactly what I said the first time I saw a vampire. Well, after I was done with the screaming part.
For this and the next few scenes, I want to point out how we alternate between Buffy and the Scoobies deliberating in the library and the Master and his minions underground. It continues the pattern from the last episode of switching between the surface and the underside of things. We go from the brightly lit place of knowledge and consciousness to the shadowy realm of monsters and tradition. But although that metaphor is still important in this episode, because the idea of the shadow and the unconscious is important to the entire show, I think this episode takes a slightly different angle on it. Specifically, the angle that I think is central to this episode is the idea of being stuck, which the last episode introduced, but this one will expand on. Because it's one thing to confront the unconscious or the problems in your life, as Buffy has begun to do. It's one thing to know that something needs to change. But it's quite another thing to truly escape those problems or to actually make a change. In this way, the episode acts as the second part of the thesis that the last episode started. Growing up isn't just about facing and enduring horrors, it's also about finding a way through them. And how to do that is what this episode will try to show. So with all that in mind, I think the way these scenes switch between above and below also conveys a sort of trapped circular thinking. We're bouncing between the two groups, neither of which can find a way out of their problem. By bouncing between them, the show also drives home the fact that the Master is a foil for Buffy. Their problems parallel each other's.
I didn't mean...
I have waited. For 70 years, I have waited. While you come and go, I am stuck here in this house of worship.
Right now, Buffy feels impotent. She's trapped by mythology. She couldn't stop Jesse from getting taken, and she doesn't know where he is being kept. The police can't help her, and neither, she thinks, can her friends. Just like the Master is trapped in his church and knows as little about Buffy as Buffy knows about him, they're both stuck.
And there was a girl. She fought well, and she knew of our breed. It is possible that she may be
A slayer?
And that would be a what?
For as long as there have been vampires, there's been the Slayer. One girl in all the world, a chosen one.
He loves doing this part.
Notice this transition between above and below again, this time with the dialogue actually overlapping. It's a segue tactic that the show loves using, which in this case reinforces the link between the two scenes. Giles' comment that as long as there have been vampires, there have been slayers also suggests the idea that Buffy and vampires more generally can be seen as mirrors of each other. Aside from Spike, vampires are not exactly shadow selves for Buffy, but they do represent the shadowed side of her. Like Buffy and Cordelia, Buffy and vampires are two sides of one coin. They are stuck to each other, like a person's physical shadow or reflection is stuck to them, just like your unconscious is stuck to you. So that said, since the Master is a foil for Buffy, then it's worth thinking about how his traits illuminate hers. What's different and what's the same? What makes the Master a villain and Buffy a hero? What keeps him stuck and what allows Buffy to escape? For one thing, he's preoccupied with purity.
an offering, Master.
He's a good one. His blood is pure.
You've tasted it.
Giles' storytelling earlier established that vampires are fundamentally impure creatures, an attitude that continues throughout the show.
This is a vampire. Lesson number 1, vampires equal impure.
The Master is impure, but he wants pure blood and performs cleansing rituals. This obsession with purity is something that characterizes many Buffy villains, from the Mantis teacher and teacher's pet who eats virgins, to the germaphobe mayor or the misogynistic Caleb.
There once was a woman, and she was foul, like all women. For Adam's rib was dirty, just like Adam himself. For what was he? But human.
But it's an attitude that is antithetical to growing up. Growing up means changing instead of dying a virgin. It means moving forward instead of looking back. It means embracing one's inherent impurity in the form of the shadow instead of being ruled by shame.
Damn right, I'm impure. I'm as impure as the driven yellow snow.
The fact that the show was critical of Christian models of purity and sin is even indicated at the very beginning of this scene, when Giles straight up says that the show's mythology runs counter to Christian mythology.
Contrary to popular mythology, it did not begin as a paradise.
The Buffy myth is not that humans ruined a paradise with their sin, but that impurity is the world's natural state of being. It goes for vampires, and it goes for humans. The Master also talks about ascension.
My ascension is almost at hand.
Which is another thing that Buffy villains like doing. Angelus in Season 2 talks about becoming. Adam wants a race of demon Ubermenschen, and the mayor, of course, wants to ascend into a pure demon snake. The thing about these forms of ascension, though, is that they're more about having power for its own sake. Power over others, power to destroy. This kind of ascension isn't about any kind of internal change or becoming a fuller, better version of oneself. It isn't about emerging from horrors or bringing the shadows into the light. None of that growing up stuff. Instead, it's about putting yourself above everyone else, which in turn isolates you from everyone too. You don't have friends anymore, you only have minions. One of Buffy's problems right now is that she's isolated in a similar way. She doesn't use or threaten people like the Master, but she does think her power and her duty sets her apart. She thinks she has to go it alone.
There's no we, okay? I'm the Slayer, and you're not.
More metaphorically, by leaving the Scoobies behind, this also indicates that she thinks she has to leave pieces of herself behind and rely only on the part of herself that is a pure, lonely Slayer. But this is portrayed as a mistake.
You're the one that told me that I wasn't prepared enough. Understatement. I thought I was on top of everything, and then that monster Luke came out of nowhere.
In the first episode, she told Giles to leave her alone, and she told Xander and Willow to get out, and lo and behold, she quickly lost her fight. She couldn't see Luke coming, just like, and notice this parallel between Buffy and vampires again. Luke lost his fight because he was caught sleeping.
Only that she fought me and yet lives.
Very nearly proof enough. I can't remember the last time that happened.
1843, Madrid. He caught me sleeping.
Luke coming out of nowhere was the punchline to all of the last episode's horror movie sequences and jokes about things being a surprise or outside of Buffy's line of sight. In each of the horror sequences, there was dread about what was lurking in the unknown, but when the unknown actually came for Buffy, it was a surprise to both her and the audience. It wasn't built up to, because it was genuinely outside of her awareness. So of course, because this is a show about plumbing the unknown, Buffy must then explore the place that was outside of her awareness in the last episode. But also because Buffy is at the beginning of her growth, it's uncertain about whether she'll succeed. Xander and Willow both want to help, and Giles is beginning to loosen up, not quite so rigid and old-fashioned.
Well, then help me. I've been researching this harvest affair. It seems to be some sort of preordained massacre.
But Buffy still can't accept their help. She sees them as useless, and so she might end up falling into the trap the Master has now set for her after all. Or she might fall prey to the traps of myth and fate in the form of this preordained massacre. Metaphorically, she still might succumb to being stuck.
That was a bit, British, wasn't it?
Welcome to the new world.
Before we move on, I also want to stop for a second and talk about the idea of Willow as a hacker, since he was just introduced, because I think it's actually a very significant thing for Willow to be. What does a hacker do? They break rules, they cross boundaries, they get you unstuck, and in particular in a youthful, modern way. By being a hacker, Willow as Buffy's spirit is given a duality. On the one hand, she cares about rules like Giles, but on the other hand, she also wants to break them. Just like Giles himself, as I mentioned, is beginning to loosen up too.
This computer invasion that Willow's performing on the coroner's office, one assumes it is entirely legal.
Entirely.
Of course.
Right. Wasn't here, didn't see it, couldn't have stopped you.
But on a third hand, that rule breaking is not always for the best. As the seasons go on, Willow's tendency to hack things that perhaps shouldn't be hacked becomes more of a problem. It becomes cheating and violation.
Forget.
But here at the beginning, when rules and mythology are more clearly oppressive, Willow's hacking is a more straightforward good. It can be good to break things, but it's also important to learn which things to break, which is something that Willow, and Buffy by extension, will later have to do.
If Jesse's alive, I'll bring him back.
Do I have to tell you to be careful?
Now we have more imagery of being stuck. This little scene is very interesting to me, mainly because it stands out for having been included despite the fact that seemingly not much happens in it, at least when it comes to plot. But when you look at things on the level of theme instead, this scene strongly associates authority and institutions with being trapped yet again.
The fence, this is quality fence work.
Because if we were leaving school grounds on our second day at a new school, after getting kicked out of our old school for delinquent behavior, do you see where I'm going with this?
The school is a place that is literally gated, that Buffy is forbidden from leaving. And it's Flutie, an authority, that's doing the gating. But despite the negative connotations of gating, I also think it's interesting that Flutie's intentions here are good. He wants Buffy to get by in his school, just like Giles, by reinforcing mythology and duty, is hoping that Buffy will prevent people from being killed. And later in the episode, we'll see Joyce try to keep Buffy at home, thinking she's setting boundaries that are for Buffy's own good. Notice how this bit is shot through the gates, making Buffy appear literally imprisoned. Traps, in other words, aren't always set by people like the Master. Sometimes they're set with good intentions by adults who just don't get your teenage problems. But that doesn't mean they're not still traps, something that Buffy needs to leap over.
Explain. Did you get natural disasters?
Earthquake, flood.
Rain of toads.
Right.
Rain of toads. Do you think they have anything like that in the paper?
I'll put it on the...
Then this next scene between Xander and Willow is an almost direct parallel of the previous scene. Xander feels impotent and is itching to leave the school to help Buffy. But Willow gently tries to hold him back, reassuring him like Flutie reassured Buffy that it's for the best. To continue the discussion of hacking, you might say that Willow as Buffy's spirit is torn. She wants to break rules, but she's still rule-bound too.
This may be the dumb question, but shouldn't we call the police?
She wants to do the safe thing. Her instinct was to go to the police, and here she's the voice of the more mythical rule that Buffy is okay by herself.
Right. But maybe you should get to class.
You mean we? We should get to class.
Yeah.
Buffy will be okay. Whatever's down there, I think she can handle it.
But Xander is going to ignore that and sneak out under it. His need to help Buffy and Jessie parallels Buffy's own willingness to break the rules in service of helping someone else. Buffy may think her heart is useless, something she needs to repress and protect, but it's also the thing most eager to ignore what it's supposed to do, for better or for worse. Here's yet more imagery of boundaries and the crossing of them, with Buffy now sneaking into the mausoleum. Also notice this door here with the lock, like the lock on the gates to the school. And once again Buffy is being shot through the bars of the door, emphasizing the fact that she's locked out.
I don't suppose you've got a key on you.
Now let's talk some more about Angel. This scene between Buffy and Angel acts as a natural extension of their scene in the last episode, and drives home a lot of the symbolism I discussed at that time. I argued then that Angel is a representation of Buffy's divided self, of her temptation to ignore or hide the shadow parts of herself. And if you accept that as true, then it makes sense that he can't help her in this scene. Buffy asks him for a key, but he can't give her one. He can't get her out of a trap. He can't help her plumb the unknown because he's hiding behind a persona as much as she is. He's as afraid of the unknown as she is. Notice how Angel is wearing the same clothes he was wearing in the last episode. He's stagnant and stuck, just like the other vampires.
Okay. Look, if you're gonna be popping up with this cryptic wise man act on a regular basis, can you at least tell me your name?
Angel.
Angel. It's a pretty name.
Don't go down there.
And now we find out Angel's name, a name which is perfect for a character as full of contradictions as he is. Angel is, like Buffy says, a pretty name. It's a name associated with virtue and purity and holiness. It's the term for a being that is a messenger of the Christian God. Yet Angel is a mediocre messenger. He's a cryptic wise man, in Buffy's own words, who only gives her messages about dark and hellish things, not God or heaven. And being a person, whether human or vampire, there's no way he can be pure. In other words, even before we know much about Angel, let alone find out about his secret identity, his name already feels a bit like a lie. It feels ironic, like saying a valley girl named Buffy is actually a mythical chosen one. It's also a name that fits the episode's irreverent attitude towards Christian mythology. In the Buffy mythos so far, we've established that the world didn't start as a paradise. Vampires are the ones who live in churches, and angels are just ambiguous, fearful men. Here Angel even goes so far as to tell Buffy to not explore the unknown at all. He is her cowardice, the part of her that wants to avoid danger and the things that scare her.
Well, if this harvest thing is such a suckfest, why don't you stop it?
'Cause I'm afraid.
It's also significant that Angel's cowardice is directly linked to him having no friends. He is isolated, just like Buffy, who thinks she doesn't need the help of her own friends.
Or at least a potential friend. Do you know what it's like to have a friend?
Because to live in a persona, to avoid the unconscious, means also avoiding the kind of authenticity that makes connection more possible. And metaphorically, if you see Buffy's friends as part of her, it also means being divided against yourself.
That's where you're likely to find them.
You gonna wish me luck?
Again, with Angel being ambivalently communicative. I think it's interesting that his line delivery is sort of odd during this whole scene, as well as in the scene in the pilot. That might be due to his characterization not having been fully worked out at this time, but I think it actually fits quite well with the idea of Angel as a man divided. His jokey tone doesn't quite match the words he's saying, just like the name Angel doesn't quite fit his cryptic personality. At this point in the show, he's still putting on a performance.
You'd figure out this entryway sooner or later. Actually, I thought it was gonna be a little sooner.
But in order to enter the unknown, Buffy has to leave all that behind. To open the gate of her unconscious, she has to let go of the fears and pretty stories that want to keep it shut.
Good luck.
And now Buffy descends into her unconscious. This imagery of descent is something that the show will return to many times, notably in Prophecy Girl, when Buffy descends into this same realm to deal with the Master, as well as in Chosen, when she descends into the Hellmouth to destroy it for good. It's imagery that taps into a concept with a very long mythological history, the concept of descent into the underworld, or land of the dead. Not only is this realm she's entering literally underground, but is populated by vampires who are dead and is associated with hell. Not to mention the fact that its entrance is in a mausoleum. Descent into the underworld is in fact such a well-known mythological pattern that it even has a specific term, catabasis. To contemporary Western audiences, the most famous catabasis story is probably the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, but there are numerous other examples from Greek writing and mythology, as well as many other cultural and religious traditions. Catabasis appears in everything from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Dante's Inferno to Egyptian books of the dead. Metaphorically, to descend into an underworld naturally represents a kind of death. But to be a true catabasis, that descent must also be followed by what's known as anabasis, or ascent. If you go down into the underworld, you must also come back up, just as Dante ascends from Inferno to Paradiso. Which means that catabasis isn't actually so much about death as rebirth. It's about transformation, the end of one thing that signals the beginning of another, or put another way, growing up. Keep this in mind for later in the episode. So in the case of Buffy, the underworld, as we've established, represents the unconscious or unknown. I think it's significant that the Sunnydale Underground is associated with sewers, and is often shown dripping with water, particularly in this episode.
Vampires really jam on sewer systems. You can get anywhere in the entire town without catching any rays.
Given how in Jungian writing, among other things, water is considered a symbol of the unconscious. And right now, the unconscious is a horror movie. It's shot just like those long horror scenes from the first episode, and once again ends with a surprise.
Xander, what are you doing here?
Something stupid. I followed you.
Well,
I couldn't just sit at home and do nothing.
This time, the surprise is that Buffy's not actually as alone as she thought. She has Xander, or metaphorically, her heart. As I was discussing earlier, Buffy thinks of her heart and humanity as vulnerable.
Buffy doesn't want you getting hurt. I don't want you getting hurt.
Buffy has Slayer's strength, but that strength can't prevent her feelings from being hurt or help her figure out her life. But it is also exactly this humanity that gives her the courage to confront the things she fears. It is her love and concern for others that pushes her to actually use her physical strength. In this way, Xander and Angel are being directly contrasted with each other. We may not know it yet, but Angel has superhuman strength just like Buffy, and yet he could not help her in the last scene. Meanwhile, Xander has no strength at all, but puts himself in harm's way because he too cares about Jessie. If Angel is Buffy's cowardice and detachment, then Xander is her bravery, which is why he has to be the one to join her on this particular underworld journey. Also notice the very pointed close-up on the cross. Instead of wielding a cross accidentally, Buffy is now beginning to wield it intentionally. She passes it on to Xander instead of receiving it from Angel.
Played left tackle for varsity. Well, at least he used to before he was a vampire. Anyway, he had this really, really thick neck, and all I had was a little X-Acto knife. You're not loving this story.
No, actually, I find it oddly comforting.
I think it's interesting that this transition swipes to the side instead of vertically, unlike the transition in the first episode. It fits with the way that Buffy is now in her subconscious. Above and below are now balanced.
On the night of the crescent moon, the first past the solstice, it will come. Of course. That's tonight.
No! It's supposed to find the syntax.
This is a funny little scene here. In some ways, it continues the pattern from the last episode, by having characters talk about Buffy from the outside, trying to figure out her deal.
Of course we're going to the Bronze. Friday night, no cover. But you should have been there last night.
Because I ran into Buffy, and could she be any weirder?
But now Buffy is becoming less isolated, which means that Willow can speak up for her. Cordelia may still not know Buffy, but at least Willow and Xander are beginning to.
She's not a psycho. You don't even know her.
The scene also continues the pattern of this episode by having Cordelia be stuck on a problem. But there's another interesting aspect to this scene, which is the revelation that Willow has a mean streak of her own. In the first episode, Cordelia seemed friendly at first, and then revealed herself to be cruel. Similarly, Willow appeared meek and accommodating in the last episode, but here she will soon calmly get revenge. She sets a trap for Cordelia like the Master has set a trap for Buffy. On the one hand, you could read this twist, along with Willow's hacking, as an indication of Buffy's increasing spirit, in a positive way. But on the other hand, these new traits of Willow's are also interesting because of how they associate a positive character with a hidden face that isn't totally morally pure, even if we're on her side. One thing people often don't realize about the term shadow is that it doesn't just come from the idea of darkness or obscurity. It also has to do with the idea that the shadow is an echo of a person. What you do, your shadow mimics, because it is, well, a shadow of you.
Why do we have to devise these programs? Isn't that what nerds are for? What'd she do?
So it makes sense that what seems like a positive side of Buffy would end up echoing what seems like a negative side. Perhaps Willow and Cordelia are not as different as they first appear. Perhaps Buffy and vampires are not so different. Perhaps they're copying each other's work.
Done. Finally, the nightmare ends! Okay, so how do we save it?
Deliver.
Deliver? Where's that? Oh!
Let's go back to catabasis now. Often in a catabasis, the person going into the underworld is going there to bring something back. Like Orpheus trying to rescue Eurydice, Gilgamesh trying to rescue Enkidu, or Buffy here trying to rescue Jessie. Metaphorically, one might read this as going through a trial of some kind and bringing back wisdom or change. To paraphrase Jung, one must first descend into the watery depths of one's unconscious in order to pluck the treasure from the bottom and come out the other side. Or in the case of Buffy, ascend to the heights of becoming oneself and growing up. Of course, Buffy won't bring Jessie back this time. She's been set up. The friend she was hoping for is a vampire because Buffy still isn't truly ready to confront her unconscious at this point. It still feels like a trap to her. It still feels like a horror movie. One thing that's very interesting to me about how the vampires are depicted in this episode is how zombie-like they are. Their hands and faces are both distorted and animalistic, and their grasping arms are right out of movies like Dawn of the Dead. They're associated with things like rats, or in the case of the Master, bats. Luke even refers to them as a breed. Their eyes in the dark and shadows on the wall. Compare the way vampires will try to break through the door, and Buffy will try to escape through the ceiling, with these sequences from Dawn of the Dead in which zombies try to get through the door to where the characters live, and the way they too try to escape through the ceiling. Right now, vampires aren't human to Buffy, they're other. And that's the horror of Jesse's transformation, which we'll soon see. He's been seemingly turned from a person to a monster, a thing, as Giles will explain later.
You listen to me. Jesse is dead. You have to remember that when you see him, you're not looking at your friend. You're looking at the thing that killed him.
I don't think this is the way out.
We can't fight a way back to those things.
Which fits the way that right now, Buffy doesn't see her shadow as part of her. She thinks it's something separate and scary. She thinks someone like Cordelia or the Master is a villain, not her.
See, man, I'm sorry. Sorry? I feel good, Xander. I feel strong. I'm connected, man, to everything. I can hear the worms in the earth.
That's a plus.
2 things I want to point out here. First is Jesse saying he feels strong and connected now that he's a vampire, which is something that other vampires will echo, like Spike in Fool for Love.
Becoming a vampire is a profound and powerful experience. I could feel this new strength coursing through me. Getting killed made me feel alive for the very first time.
Or hold it in conversations with dead people, who directly parallels this scene.
So I'm a vampire. How weird is that?
Sorry.
No. Feels great. Strong. Like I'm connected to a powerful, all-consuming evil that's gonna suck the world into a fiery oblivion.
If catabasis is about rebirth, about going through a trial and coming out transformed, then vampirism is a perversion of it. To be a vampire is to die and stay dead, both physically and spiritually. You might feel strong and connected, but it's a selfish, coercive kind of strength. You might feel transformed, but you're still stuck underground in the dark. Whereas Buffy will go down into these depths to die and be reborn at the end of the season, but when she feels stronger, it's because she's conquered her fears.
No, I feel strong. I feel different.
The other thing I want to point out is Jesse saying that Xander is like a shadow.
You're like a shadow to me now.
Shadow is an unusual and therefore significant word for Jesse to use here. He equates being a shadow with being beneath his notice. The moment Jesse becomes a vampire, becomes a part of the shadow of the show, he becomes disconnected from Xander, and Buffy by extension, which makes his claims of being connected particularly ironic. The cross between them underlines this disconnection, and creates yet more ambiguity about the value and purpose of these sorts of collective symbols. The cross keeps the shadow away, but is that good? People often think of the humanization of Buffy's vampires as something that only happened later in the show, or as something that the writing did not willingly or intentionally participate in. But I think it's telling that this episode, in which vampires are at their most horror movie-esque, and in which Giles is at his most hardline dogmatic about the inhuman nature of them, also works to establish the symbolic kinship between Buffy and those same vampires. The show's point in my read is not that all vampires are good deep down, or even necessarily capable of it. The point is simply that they're not other. They are a representation of a side of you. They are the you could be if you decided not to grow up. And this makes them important. It means they cannot be dismissed and ignored as simply a monster in the dark. Your friend can be a vampire. The guy you're crushing on can be a vampire. You can be a vampire. As they say in Dawn of the Dead itself.
What the hell are they?
They're us, that's all.
But Buffy does not yet understand this. Her shadow is still a shadow to her, an inhuman massive monsters that she's trying to keep out. It's worth mentioning that the Season 7 Ubervamps are also obviously depicted as inhuman, but I'll talk about the significance of that many episodes from now. Still, although Buffy doesn't rescue Jessie, she does emerge from the underworld with something she didn't enter with, Xander. She may not have gotten the treasure she wanted, but she still got something. She got her bravery. She changed.
She walks free when I should be drinking her heart's blood right now. Careless. Lester, we had a trap.
I like this reference to drinking Buffy's heart's blood because of the connection to Xander, similar to the vampire trying to eat Willow in the first episode and trapping her in the mausoleum. Vampires want to sap and trap Buffy's heart and spirit, the things that make her herself, the things that go beyond being a slayer assigned to a mythological role. Exactly the part that Buffy herself started the episode thinking she needed to abandon.
Bring him to me. Colin. You failed me. Tell me you're sorry. I'm sorry. There. That wasn't so bad, was it? Oh, hold on. You've got something in your eye.
Buffy?
It's just me.
Very pointed to associate the master with blindness here. Partly it seems to be a play on the Christian parable about the mote and the beam. The master doesn't care about not judging others or being judged in return. He'll point out your mote, and then some. But at the same time, the master's gleeful hypocrisy potentially parallels Buffy's own issues of perception. It segues right into Giles misperceiving Willow as Buffy. Buffy is still struggling to see things. She didn't see Luke. She didn't see Xander. She didn't see Jessie. As I've discussed, her perception, like ours, is trapped by mythology and the frame of the show. But unlike the Master, who perpetuates eye-for-an-eye blindness upon his minions, Buffy is ultimately trying to transcend that, in the form of her mind and spirit who are seeking out answers and explanations.
It's all coming together. I rather wish it weren't.
But that's the downside of seeing things, of course. That's why one avoids perceiving things in the first place, because it's frightening or painful or inconvenient to perceive them. Giles's line about coming together is also potentially a pun about the Christian symbolism we're about to get more of in this scene. Bear with me, because I'm about to summarize a bunch of very complicated and diverse theology. First, this scene references the Catholic tradition of kissing the hands of high-ranking figures like popes and cardinals. Outside of the context of religion, it also references the practice of kissing the ring to show submission to another person's authority. Second, Luke drinking the Master's blood references the Christian ritual of communion, in which worshippers consume the body and blood of Jesus in the form of consecrated bread and wine. Third, the Master putting blood on Luke's forehead references the Christian practice of baptism, which can involve sprinkling water on the forehead as well. It also evokes the Ash Wednesday practice of marking the forehead with a cross of ash, to remind adherents of their mortality and need for penance. Lastly, I want to mention that the title Master is also something that the disciples of Jesus sometimes called him, which means that the Master's goal here, of walking in the world once more, could be seen as a twisted version of the Christian belief that Jesus will one day return to Earth. The interesting thing about this scene, however, is the way it subverts the typical symbolism when it comes to vampires and Christianity. In Dracula, for example, vampirism is treated as a straightforward perversion of Catholic theology. Both communion and baptism are supposed to be celebrations of purification from sin, which vampirism turns into pollution. Instead of consuming Jesus' blood and being granted eternal life with God, a person consumes human blood and finds eternal life as a vampire. Similarly, when a person is baptized, they are reborn into the church and cleansed of their original sin. Whereas in Dracula, a person is reborn as a vampire by being polluted with sin.
My blood is your blood. My soul is your soul.
My body is your instrument.
On this most hallowed night, we are as one. Luke is the vessel. Every soul he takes will feed me, and their souls will grant me the strength to free myself.
But instead of criticizing impurity, Buffy is more interested in criticizing Christian institutions. After all, as we've established, the Master's association with purity is supposed to be a bad thing. In the Catholic Church, when a priest offers communion, he is essentially acting as a vessel for Jesus, who in turn was acting as a vessel for God. They are all one with each other, just as Luke shares blood with the Master and acts as his vessel. Season 7 will repeat this imagery even more explicitly, when Caleb, who speaks and dresses as a priest, acts as a vessel for the first. Similarly, Roman Catholics consider the Church to be an extension of Jesus, and so by being baptized and joining the Church, a person becomes one with Jesus as well. By evoking this symbolism, the show evokes the way that people can become vessels for mythology, or tools of a corrupt institution. In Buffy, to be a tool or a vessel means not having agency, identity, or a will of one's own. It means being empty.
I know what the Master wants. I'll serve his purpose. That means you die.
Which is, like the Ascension and Purity stuff, antithetical to the show's idea of becoming one's own person. If your identity is one with an institution, then it's no longer yours. Contrast the intensely tilted shots in this scene that put the Master in a position of dominance over Luke, with the scene from Blood Ties in which Buffy is with Dawn on the ground and is shot with them on the same level.
Because I love you. You're my sister.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. Look, it's blood. It's Summer's blood. It's just like mine.
Buffy emphasizes her blood connection with Dawn, but despite the fact that Dawn was literally made from Buffy, the point of Buffy telling Dawn these things is to reassure her that she is real and a person. She's not simply a vessel for the key, just as Buffy struggles to not simply be a vessel for her duty. In Buffy, vampirism is still perversion, but it's a perversion of identity rather than Christian morality. Let's switch gears and talk some more about the Hellmouth, which we're about to get exposition on.
He came because his town's a mystical. Who's it?
Yes. The Spanish who first settled here called it Boca del Infierno, roughly translated Hellmouth. It's a sort of portal between this reality and the next. This vampire hoped to open it.
Bring the demons back.
End of the world.
But he blew it. Or, I mean, there was an earthquake that swallowed half the town, and him too.
You see, opening dimensional portals is a tricky business. Odds are he got himself stuck, rather like a cork in a bottle.
And this harvest thing is to get him out.
The Hellmouth is a useful narrative conceit to explain the supernatural aspect of the show, and to represent things like the unconscious or the hells of growing up. But it's also, as Giles explains, a portal. Throughout the show, Buffy loves using imagery of doorways and portals. There's the portal Buffy sends Angel through in Becoming. There's the portal in The Gift that Buffy jumps into to get to the adult seasons of the show. There's the seal on the Hellmouth in Season 7. And of course, there are the locked doorways we've seen in this episode already. The point of doorways and portals is that they're points of transition or change. They're thresholds, both literally and metaphorically. They represent the membrane between things like the conscious and unconscious, surface and subtext, or most importantly, between youth and adulthood. Because the task ahead of Buffy is to cross these thresholds. As I was explaining before, the Hellmouth isn't just something that Buffy is supposed to suffer, it's something she's supposed to go through. Just like with Catabasis, the point is that she's supposed to change. She's supposed to grow up. She's supposed to start in one reality and come out in another. And in contrast to her, as ever, is the Master. The Master tried to move between realities, but he got stuck. He couldn't cross the threshold, just like any vampire can't cross the threshold of a human house. He tried to free the unconscious, but it ended up trapping him even further. Metaphorically, you might also see him as the cork in Buffy's own mental bottle. He is a cork of tradition that is holding her back. When she finally defeats him, she'll put herself on the path to confronting her unconscious in a positive way, to collapsing the Hellmouth but not being trapped by it.
We haven't finished unpacking and I'm getting calls from the principal.
Mom, I promise it is not going to be like before. But I have to go.
No.
Mom!
The tapes all say I should get used to saying it. No.
This is really, really important.
I know. If you don't go out, it'll be the end of the world. Everything is life or death when you're a 16-year-old girl.
Like I mentioned during the gate scene with Flutie, this scene is yet another example of an authority figure trying to set boundaries on Buffy. Like the bedroom scene between Buffy and Joyce in the first episode, it also serves to remind us of the real-world thing that the rest of the show is a metaphor for. Sometimes, being a teenager does feel like the end of the world, and sometimes it's also right to feel that way. As a teenager, you're constantly changing and becoming a new person. You're trying to figure out which rules are worth following and which are worth breaking. When you should trust your mom and when you should trust yourself. In some sense, the world of who you are really is constantly ending and being reborn. And as ever, because this is a bedroom scene, we should be thinking about Buffy's self. In contrast to the scene between Buffy and Joyce in the last episode, Buffy has now begun to figure out who she is. In the first scene, Buffy was all about persona. She was trying on different masks and wanted to perform normality both for her mom and herself. Now, Buffy is once again preparing to go to the Bronze, but this time she's diving straight into her secret Slayer identity. She takes off her normal girl persona and reaches for the weapons underneath. She girds herself in leather armor instead and stocks up on her mythological tools. I want to point out the shots of Sundown, both the one we got before and the one we're about to get. The reason I've spent so long talking about things like catabasis, thresholds, baptism, and other variations on the topic of rebirth is because together I see the first two episodes of the show as forming a kind of V. In Welcome to the Hellmouth, Buffy starts out in the sunshine, and also in denial. But then over the course of the episode, she descends further and further into the dark, before ending in a literal coffin. She finishes in a place of death. But over the course of this episode, she heads in the opposite direction, before eventually finishing in the sunlight. She started the episode wearing a black shirt, but now she's wearing a white shirt. Buffy went further down into the dark than ever this episode, but she also came back up, just like the sun is going down right now, but will eventually come back too. The sun is one of the oldest symbols of rebirth there is, given its association with the cycles of day and night, and that makes it appropriate to reference here. It might seem like I'm making a lot of a couple establishing shots, but despite the fact that this show features constant transitions between night and day, it actually only uses shots of the sun in particular episodes, and that makes it worth pointing out.
But senior boys, they have mystery. They have, what's the word I'm searching for? Cars. I just am not the type to settle, you know? It's like when I go shopping.
Just like in the computer room scene, we're about to get another comparison between Cordelia and Willow, and Buffy by extension. Cordelia might seem self-assured right now, but she's about to make the same mistake that Willow did in the last episode. Because of her ignorance, Willow was seduced by a vampire and almost killed. And now Cordelia will be taken in by Jesse the same way. Once again, we see that Cordelia is not the villain of the show. As self-centered as she might be, she's still not a vampire. She's a person in danger from vampires, just like Buffy. Cordelia also descends from the balcony just like Buffy did in the first episode, and will do again in a few minutes. Notice this shot of Jesse, which will get repeated with Angel and Passion, as well as Spike and School Hard. It's a shot that implies predatory intent, of course, but it's also a shot that conveys the way in which vampires are predatory. It emphasizes Jesse's detachment, the way that people are like a shadow to him now. It also emphasizes the fact that Jesse is outside of Cordelia's awareness, because it is the invisible, shadowed nature of vampires that makes him dangerous.
What do you want? Hey, hello? Hey, man brain, what are you doing?
I also want to mention that the song that's playing right now is called Ballad for Dead Friends, which is obviously fitting for Jesse, and also perhaps a warning about what might happen to Cordelia. Now the vampires are coming out of the shadows, out of the background where they've been hidden, in this case, the literal background of the shot, to come wreak havoc in the foreground. I love the fact that the vampires don't provide ID here. Practically speaking, of course villainous vampires wouldn't care about providing ID. But on a more thematic level, it fits the way that vampirism in Buffy is a perversion of identity.
ID. Hey, nobody gets inside until I get some sort of...
Get inside.
Vampires lack the ability to develop their own identity, and thus they cannot show identity either. In the last episode, I mentioned how the bronze contributes a meta aspect to the show, and I think that's relevant to the shots we're about to get of Luke grandstanding on the stage like a performer.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is no cause for alarm.
Here, Luke is associated with theater. He's associated with performance, with things like art and fiction. Partly, this seems connected to the idea of vampires as people who wear masks over hidden faces. Vampires are all persona, a performance with nothing behind it. But I think it's also connected to the episode's ambivalence around mythology. So far, I've failed to mention anything about Luke's name, but I think it's relevant here. Given the many connections between vampires and Christianity in this episode, the likely inspiration for Luke's name is Luke the Evangelist. Luke the Evangelist is traditionally considered to be the author of more than a quarter of the New Testament, which means he wrote more of it than anyone else. Put another way, this means that Luke is an author of mythology. He's one of the authors of the same Genesis story that Giles dismissed at the beginning of the episode. So by putting this author of mythology up on a stage, it connects him to the mythology of art as well. Actors, directors, and Bible writers, all of them are making myths.
It's locked.
Yet another locked door for Buffy, her final locked door of the episode, and getting past it will take her to the episode's climactic fight.
Come on. Wait, guys. Here. You get the exit cleared and the people out, that's all. Don't go wild bunch on me.
Let's stop and talk about the Wild Bunch, because the show never references this stuff by accident. The Wild Bunch is a 1969 Western about an aging group of outlaws. None of them are dealing well with the changes of the modern world, and their leader is hoping to make enough off of a score to finally retire. The movie famously ends with the protagonists in a brutal shootout in which every one of them dies. A machine gun acts as the centerpiece of this final fight, emphasizing their defeat at the hands of modernity. So on the most surface level, Buffy's warning simply means that the Scoobies should be careful. Don't get into more than you can handle and end up dead. But on a more thematic level, Buffy's warning also means that they should not align themselves with the people who are old and out of touch. You need to embrace being young and modern. You need to be able to adapt and change, or you'll end up dead like a vampire, like the characters of the Wild Bunch. In Season 2, the show will actually explicitly take two of the protagonists from the Wild Bunch, the brothers Lyle and Hector Gorge, and turn them into vampires. Another protagonist in the movie is named Angel, or Angel to the white characters, and the angel we know in Buffy is, wait for it, also a vampire. Thus far, I haven't said too much about the harvest itself, so let's finally do that. The word harvest is obviously associated with agriculture and therefore growth. You plant crops and then you harvest them. But, as I discussed in the first episode, the Master hasn't planted anything. He hasn't grown anything, he only harvests. And this is what makes him a vampire.
I don't get one?
Not only that, but by being a person who only harvests, this puts him outside of cycles of rebirth. Normally you plant crops, you harvest them, and this leaves room to plant crops anew. To be a farmer is to be part of the cycles of the seasons, the sun, and life and death in general. The reason that the image of death is so often associated with the scythe is because of this connection to cycles. This is why we call him the Reaper. Death harvests souls so that new souls can be born, so that the circle of life, so to speak, can continue. But the Master is not a true Reaper, because he is perverting this process by harvesting souls only to free himself. Earlier, when Willow asked if Jesse was dead, Buffy's reply was telling.
Did you find Jesse?
Yeah.
Was he dead?
Worse.
As frightening as it is, death itself is not the worst thing in Buffy. Death has a place in the cycle. What's worse is interrupting that cycle. What's worse is being stuck. This in turn is the significance of Buffy's weapon in the final episodes of the show being called the Scythe. She is a Reaper, but in a positive way. When she kills vampires, she is releasing them from their stagnancy and returning them to the cycle of life and death. They become ashes. They become just like everyone else, who dies ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Buffy is also not a person who is merely destructive. Her scythe is a tool of death, but it is also a tool of empowerment, the thing that literally enables her to share her Slayer power. If the Master takes people's power, then Buffy gives it. When Buffy frees herself from the Hellmouth, she won't do it by stealing souls, she'll do it by empowering them, and she'll be assisted by a vampire who earned a soul for himself.
You want blood?
I want yours. Only yours.
Works for me.
Just like at the end of the first episode, Buffy is fighting Luke by herself. In both episodes, Buffy starts out confident, but then it seems like Luke might be getting the best of her. But unlike in the first episode, the Scoobies will soon join in the fight. They open the locked door they've been stuck behind and can now help. Buffy's heart, mind, and spirit are now engaged, and that's what allows her to turn the tide and save people's lives. In a sense, the Scoobies share their power with Buffy, just like they'll share it in Primeval. But it is not an exploitative hierarchical sharing of power, like the Master has with Luke, his minions, and the people whose souls he's stealing. Instead, it is willing and cooperative.
This way. Heads up.
Yet another parallel between Buffy and Cordelia here. Both are trapped and attacked by a vampire at the same time. The same will soon go for Giles.
You're not making this easy.
Jesse, man. Don't make me do it.
Buddy.
I always wanted to kill a Slayer.
Coming up, here's a good example of what I mean by vampires starting out seeming other and steadily having more in common with the human characters.
Jesse, I know there's still a part of you in there.
Okay, let's deal with this.
Jesse was an excruciating loser who couldn't get a date with anyone in the sighted community. Look at me. I'm a new man.
Jesse complaining about being a loser and finding power as a vampire has things in common with Spike's backstory, but more importantly is almost exactly how Willow will describe herself during the Dark Willow arc.
You have to remember you're still Willow.
Let me tell you something about Willow. She's a loser, and she always has been.
It also has things in common with the human nerd trio, who go from outcasts to megalomaniacs. The point in all cases is that however disempowered you feel, having power over others is not a true escape from that problem. It's not a real version of becoming a new person. It's a stagnant, vampire form of escape.
All right, put me out of my misery. You don't have the gun.
In another reversal from the first episode, as well as earlier in this episode, Buffy is now the one to surprise and trick her opponents. She's the one who takes Luke by surprise. She's the one to bait him into making himself vulnerable. The Scoobies are the ones to sneak in by a side door. Willow is able to attack Darla from behind. By accepting the help of her friends, and therefore herself, Buffy has begun to fix some of her perception issues. She's cast off a bit of the mythology that was trapping her vision. She can see more angles than her vampire counterparts, and therefore beat them.
It's in about 9 hours, moron.
Still, she hasn't fully grown into herself yet, and I think that's what the accidental staking of Jesse represents. In conversations with dead people, Buffy is able to kill Holden. Holden repeats Jesse's dialogue from The Harvest, but instead of being confused about whether Holden is other or not now that he's turned, Buffy tells him he's not a stranger.
You're not a stranger.
And kills him deliberately. She no longer sees her shadow as other, but she also understands her role in ending the stagnancy that vampires represent. But it's too early for that now. Buffy's heart makes her brave, but it also leaves her confused. And now Buffy has returned to her rightful place of dominance. In the beginning of the first episode, she was shown to be on top of things, but then vampires got the upper hand and were shown in dominant positions. But now Buffy has overcome her first fears. She's back on top, and the camera shoots her from below accordingly, and shoots the Master from above, making him look smaller than ever. Buffy is the one who owns the stage now, who is, for now, dominant over mythology. But she'll also get down off of the stage, abandoning the persona of performance too. Once again, Angel is associated with detachment here. He lurks outside the door, not belonging to either the human or the vampire side of the fight.
I'll be damned.
In contrast to Buffy and the Scoobies, he acts only as an observer. The sign behind him warns to watch your step, potentially a comment on Angel being a person that watches, or potentially an omen about his hidden identity. The fact that he says he'll be damned and joins the fleeing vampires also both point to his vampire nature. Not only will Buffy literally damn Angel 2 seasons from now, and not only does his soul act as a kind of damnation, but it's Angel's detachment that makes him a vampire. It's what makes him stuck or damned like them, despite his soul.
Well, we averted the apocalypse. I'd give us points for that.
One thing's for sure. Nothing's ever gonna be the same.
The comment about nothing being the same cements the idea of this episode being about change. Buffy was victorious, and what did she get from that victory? Change. Here we are back in the daytime. Buffy started in the daylight, then she went down into the dark multiple times. She went to the cemetery, she fell into a coffin, she found out a friend was dead. But now she's come out the other side. She made it up out of the underworld and was changed by the experience.
We should at least had an assembly.
People have a tendency to rationalize what they can and forget what they can't.
Believe me.
This line really lays out the idea of the Hellmouth as a repressed unconscious more clearly than ever. It's the thing lurking below that the citizens of Sunnydale do their best to rationalize and forget, which is in contrast to Buffy and the Scoobies, our heroes, who are conscious of it. And this in total is the thesis of the show. To be a hero in Buffy is to confront your demons, whatever form they take, to dive into the mouth of hell, to cast off the things that lie to you, to know and integrate all of the parts of yourself. Because if you do that, you might just find yourself free. Not the false freedom of the Master, but true freedom, the freedom that comes from being your whole self. And this is the real harvest of the episode, the harvest that Buffy will spend the rest of the show growing. She will spend 7 years battling her way through the trials of growing up, confronting everything difficult and scary about becoming her own person, until finally she makes it to the other side, until finally she's able to reap the reward of everything she's been sowing, herself.
The Earth is doomed.
And that's it for Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 1, Episode 2, The Harvest. See you in the next one.